Hello again and welcome to another episode of Mordian Glory Tries Winter Assault. Well, it was going to be an episode of Mordian Glory Tries Winter Assault, but for some reason my microphone when recording this game didn't pick up my voice, and I thought I completed the mission, mission 3, and I thought it was a bit of a waste to just throw away the footage. I mean, it's like a 43-minute video. I thought it'd be a bit of a waste to throw that away. So I thought, make a better bad situation. What we'll do is we'll have the footage playing in the background, and if people want to watch it and just see me play the game, then that's fine. But we'll just sort of take this as an opportunity to do a bit more of a relaxed video. That's the whole point of these videos. A bit more relaxed, a bit less formal. No, there's no worries with that, and these videos, these Mordian Glory Tries Winter Assault, they don't really get a lot of views anyway. It's just for fun. People, just like a bit of Dawn of War, don't they? At the end of the day, so those of you that want Dawn of War, there you go. It'll be present, and for those of you that are here for what I have cooked up in store for us today, that's also good. So what I've decided to talk about is a video that I've been meaning to do for a while now, which is basically how my history with Warhammer. The journey I have been on with 40k and Warhammer and all that other good stuff. And it's a long tale. I've been doing. I started Warhammer when I was essentially first Warhammer model I ever saw. I think I was 4 or 5 years old, for example. Obviously, I didn't start collecting straight away then, but and I have had breaks in me playing, 40k and whatnot. And when you're a kid, it doesn't really count. But yeah, essentially that's where we're going to start. That is where we're going to start. We're going to start with the first model I ever saw to roughly to date. And I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail, but just I imagine it'd be interesting for a lot of people because it's in. I feel like my 40k journey is relatively typical, and I bet a lot of people will be able to relate to the sort of stories I have, and also it'll be interesting to see how I would like a lot of the comments to be how other people got into 40k and if it's similar or if it's different to how I got into 40k, basically. So what happened was I remember really distinctly. I had obviously the first Warhammer I ever saw. I think I was 5 years old, and I have an older brother who's my regular Blood Angel opponent on this channel. And basically, we had some family friends, and their kids had Warhammer. Now, I didn't know this at the time, and their kids had Warhammer. And the first, and I remember I'd stayed at home, but my brother had gone off and spent some time with the family friend, and it was me and my brother who had obviously 2 boys, and then the family friends had 2 boys as well, and they collected Warhammer. And my brother came home and said, he was 4 years older than me, so he was only 9. He was like, Mordian Glory, Mordian Glory. Obviously, he didn't call me that, but bro, look at this. This is really cool. This is what our family friends have. What do you think of this? And what he showed me was an old style tactical space marine, and it had, I think it was a Dark Elder head instead of a tactical marine head, and that's because the family friends that we had, the older one had Space Marines and the younger one had Dark Elder, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. What is that? Like, I had no idea what it was. I couldn't, I literally didn't understand what I was seeing. Like, what is this cool thing? And my brother was like, oh yeah, it's this thing called Warhammer. It's really cool. I've had a game with I think it was Edward and William, and it's really, really interesting. I think we should get it, and I'm going to talk to Dad about it and see if he can get us some. And I was like, yeah, cool, that's great, because I was just a little kid, and I just wanted to do what my older brother wanted to do. Being the younger brother, I obviously massively at the time looked up to my older brother. My older brother was my hero, So, no, it was that was it basically. And months, weeks may have passed. My brother, spoke to my mum and dad. He was like, I really want to get into this. My dad, at the time, I believe, he owned a computer shop business, like, fixing computers and stuff. He had a little shop and everything. And so, obviously, a lot of the people that he employed were computer nerds, and computer nerds and Warhammer go hand in hand. So one of his employees, who he got on really well with, said, oh, yeah, I've got a load of old Warhammer that I don't use anymore. Your kids can have it. Or maybe my dad bought it off him or whatever, I don't know. I was too young to understand the complexities of money back then. And so what my dad came home with for my brother and myself was a huge box of Space Marines and Orcs. Okay, and my brother had Blood Angels. That was my brother's first sort of love, first army. And this is where it all started. My brother got this huge box of Blood Angels, and I got this huge box of Space Orcs. Now, back in the day, it was very important to understand the difference between, they were Space Orcs, because there were Feral Orcs, there were Space Orcs, there were Speed Freaks, there was Gork and Morka. There was loads of stuff out around that time. So, mine were Space Orcs 40k, and what I had was I got the old metal Gazgul Thracker model, like the really old one, who I just used as a war boss. I had a couple of I think I had a war bike, a single war bike, so I'd often put my war boss on my war bike. And I think I had 40 to 60 of the really old Space Orc models, the one which have the slugger and chopper, and they're all stood very monopose, with axe in the left hand or gun in the left hand, axe in the, I can't remember which one it was. Very completely monopose, single part models. And I got about 40 to 60 of the really old school Grot models, the old Gretchens, the ones that all had the auto guns and was, stood stock still, and they all looked identical, the little pointy hats. And let me tell you, my dad instantly regretted buying me those, because he would constantly step on the Gretchen models, and those spiky hats were perfect at piercing into his foot. So I that was where I learned, like, very quickly the lesson in tidy up your Warhammer, because if I didn't tidy it up, it would get stood on, and my dad would obviously get very angry because he'd be in pain, and I would get told off because I hadn't tidied up and I was a messy boy. But anyway, so that's what we started off with, and I had no idea what I was doing. Bear in mind, when I say I was playing Warhammer at this point, I was setting my models up, and my brother would basically, I would say, I want to do this, and my brother, who had a, very rudimentary understanding of the rules as well, neither of us really understood points or rules or whatever, would sort of, we had the old second edition copy of the rule book, the one with the Sisters of Battle on the front, and we used the points from in there, and basically we would have battles on, and it was just on the carpet, I think when we first played it was in my parents' first house. And they had a basement, and in the basement they'd had a games room where, like, we had the PlayStation 1, and we had our Warhammer, and we had all the other like toys that we had, like Action Men and shit like that. And what would happen is we would play on the basement, and what happened, that was obviously really cool, but we didn't know what we were doing. And I remember, like, will be a few months, maybe a year later, that's when my dad, again from the same employee who had loads of Warhammer, he got the Necromunda terrain. Now, you've seen that Necromunda terrain, the old cardboard stuff, in my early battle reports. It is the same terrain. I have kept hold of that terrain. Me and my brother, we still use it. It's fantastic terrain, still durable. It's a bit rough for wear. But that really opened up our eyes. We were like, wow, look at these cool buildings, and we can put our men in the buildings. Oh, this is amazing. It's so cool. So that's what And that's sort of how, that was sort of the first couple of years, as sort of playing, 2nd edition, 40k, not really having a clue what was going on, but just having a blast. And I never won. And being a little kid, I used to get really disheartened that I never beat my brother. But my brother, you know, being my brother, you know, we were quite, I wouldn't say competitive, but we would compete against each other. So my brother never went easy on me, which I think in the long run was a really good thing, because it some of the, you know, it's definitely instilled this competitive nature in me. Definitely, you know, he never let me off easy, basically. But that was the first couple of years, and then we moved house, moved way away from where we used to live, and that was because my brother went to secondary school, and my parents wanted to put him into a good school, so we moved area, and the hope was that I would follow his footsteps and go to the same school, and that was cool. But my brother went to secondary school, and they had a Warhammer club. And so this really, I think, is what kick-started our and my, you know, my brother's and mine involvement in Warhammer properly, because he obviously was then able to learn the rules properly by playing other people at school, and then he would come home and he would teach me. And this is also, I think, the first time that we learn about Warhammer Fantasy. So I started off in 40k, but I didn't really know what I was doing. The first game system I properly learned about was Warhammer Fantasy. And I remember saving, I can't remember, the memory is fuzzy, but I remember essentially my brother having vampire counts. I think they were his first army, vampire counts. And I had Empire. And I loved my Empire army. And one of the biggest regrets to this day is me selling it when I really wish I hadn't. And now I'll never be able to get that army back. Well, I could buy it from Games Workshop, I suppose, but it's the old style models. But anyway, that is probably my biggest, definitely my biggest 40k regret. Possibly my biggest life regret, which if that's my biggest one, I guess it's not too bad going, is it? But so what happened is I had Empire, and I remember distinctly I had one greatsword, which I used as a captain. Well, I didn't know what it was. I just said, this is my general. My brother, obviously, at this point, I was still young. I was only like 7 or 8 years old. At this point, my brother was still working my points out for me. And he was still working my points out for me and sort of telling me what to do. But I was learning the rules. At this point, it wasn't just, I want to do this. My brother would tell me, you roll this and this will work. At this point, I was sort of learning, you know, this is what weapon skill means. This is what blitz skill means. This is what initiative means. I was learning all these things, and we were still playing on the carpet with our old terrain and stuff. But this time we had fantasy, and he had vampire counts. I don't really remember his models very well. I remember he had some skeletons which were painted more brown than bone. But I had some free company, and I had a single greatsword which I used as a captain with a great weapon. Obviously, I didn't know he was a captain of the great weapon. I just, you know, said I want this, and we had I remember distinctly we had the Ravening Hordes book. So Games Workshop, I guess it was almost like an index for like 8th edition, but it was for fantasy, and it was Ravening Hordes. I had a picture of a night goblin on the front. Oh god, that brings my memories back. And it had loads and loads of, had all the different armies in there. Like it was like a mini codex for all the different armies, and so that's what we used until my brother eventually got his 4th edition Vampire Counts book, and I had my 4th edition Empire book. I think it was 4th edition. His was the one with like the green looking. It's like a vampire, like green background on the front cover, and my Empire one was the one with sort of the state troops on the front. I believe it was. I can't remember exactly. But anyway, the point is we played Ravening Hordes, and I had like 10 or so spearmen, some free company, I had a single like Empire Knight, I had a single greatsword, and I think I had like 5 to 10 handgunners and crossbowmen. You know, a really small army. My brother had like, you know, same amount, but in like vampire counts. He had some zombies, which used to scare the crap out of me. He had some skeletons. And we used to play, and it was, you know, it was just on the, again, it was still on the floor, and it was still all good. And I think I got the Empire stuff. It's where it came from is I can't remember if my dad got that, or if this was something that my brother got from somebody at the Warhammer Club, one of the older boys. Because remember, he was in first year of secondary school when he was like 11, and so there would have been people who were doing their GCSEs, their A levels, and they're doing their higher education, like sixth form, getting all that. You know, so basically 17, 8-year-olds and 18-year-olds. And I think he got some stuff off them, and you know, he used some birthday money, and I used some birthday money, and this is how we got our models, basically. And so we would regularly play fantasy, and we actually moved away from 40k. We didn't play 40k as much at all. And I honestly think 40k got left behind for me completely. You know, I didn't like. I guess we'd still play it, but fantasy definitely took the priority. And because I never bought any more models for my orcs, I just had the same ones. I mean, I think for my birthday I got some like war tracks and war trucks and stuff like that. But I used to get my army transitioned to a speed freaks army, basically, and I had the war tracks. I had like 2 war tracks and some war trucks. I never had any of the war buggies. I really wanted some, and I remember my brother and me would kit bash loads. We'd be constantly kit bashing models for my orc army. You know, using old Space Marines. I had a battle wagon that was made out of like a Predator and an orc truck, and it had the old metal zap gun on top. So I still was playing 40k. I want to get this understood, but I was definitely playing fantasy a lot more. Fantasy became the main aim of the game. And then a couple of years go by, my brother gets, and in this time my brother gets his Imperial Guard army, which he called the Scavengers, and he had loads of fluff made up around this. And I think it was back in the day when you had like vehicle customization rules and stuff from Games Workshop, and you could make your own models up as well, and you based on the stats and stuff, you were able to make your own models and come up with rules for them. And Games Workshop completely backed it. So he had loads of really cool stuff. I don't remember exactly what was in his Imperial Guard army. He never really played me with it. That was his army that he would use to play at high school, or secondary school, in the Warhammer Club. I remember he had a Leave Rust Demolisher, and a bunch of like homemade models, and you know, a bunch of Imperial Guard. I want to say there was some Catachans in there. It was the whole point. It was a scavenger army, ragtag band of guys that were. I don't know if they were loyal to the Imperial. I don't really remember. Like I said, I didn't really play them very much, but I think he sold his Blood Angels to buy these Imperial Guard. And then I think what essentially happened was my family moved house again. So we moved once, and that's when we got to, you know, more into fantasy. Me and brother were playing fantasy more and more, and I was getting more and more models for fantasy. And we moved again, and we moved away, and so my brother, we didn't have a lot of friends because we had each other. And so, you know, when my brother was in secondary school, obviously he would play with his friends, and his friends would come over, blah 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 blah, and we'd hang out then. But when we moved again, we moved really far away. Still going to the same secondary school, but we moved like to the other side, basically. And so we ended up playing a lot of fantasy. We played a lot of fantasy together. I would have been about 9 or 10. Every 2 years we sort of moved. I would have been 9 or 10. My parents moved, by the way, because my dad wanted it was he had his computer shop, but I think he'd sold that at this time, and instead he was doing property development, and so we had moved to into the property that we were redeveloping, to sell and whatever. But I was a kid; I didn't really understand why we were moving. I just knew I had to move, and then I was leaving all my friends behind, and so my brother obviously was as well, and so we ended up playing Warhammer like every other night. The house we moved to was a big old English house, but it was all run down. So, but because it was big and there was loads of rooms and everything, loads of spare rooms, essentially we had this huge game room, and we could leave our Warhammer battles up for days and days, and we would do. We'd play them, we'd come back, we'd play them, and combat them, and at this point, our armies my Empire army had become much bigger. And at this point, I believe I was getting to the point where I had a proper Empire army. I had something, and I had made lots of new friends, and it was really interesting. The area we moved to, it was in the countryside, and loads of people had Warhammer. I think every friend I made had some Warhammer. And I remember at this time, just before we moved, like 6 months before we moved, my brother, the Warriors of Chaos were released as a proper faction. My brother spent all his money, I mean all of it. He sold his vampire accounts and he spent every last penny buying this huge get starting box with Chaos Warriors, and it had something like maybe one of you guys will be able to tell me. It was a huge box of Warriors of Chaos, and it had like 2 boxes of Marauders in there, and it had 2 boxes of Chaos Warriors in there, and it had some Chaos Knights as well. And I think it even had like a Chaos Spawn in there. It was a huge box. It cost it was the most expensive one. Loads of the models were like metal, and it cost like £100. And I remember distinctly my brother waiting and watching like every day for the postman to come and deliver this. And when he saw the postman coming down the road with this huge box, the postman was struggling under the weight of it. My brother ran out to meet him and got it, and we opened it up together. We're like, wow, look at all this cool stuff, it's amazing. And so I think because he got that, my parents, they didn't want me to be left out. My brother also wanted me to have a good army. This is when I got loads of Empire stuff. So I had like, by the time we moved to the new place, after like 6 months of moving there, I had like 30 spearmen, 30 halberdiers, 15 crossmen, 15 handgunners, 10 Empire Knights, just loads of bits. I had like 2 cannons. I got a steam tank for my birthday, which I never got around to building because it was huge. It was fully metal. I still got it. I've still got that steam tank unbuilt at my parents' house. I should probably go and get it off them. I bet it's worth quite a lot of metal steam tank. But yeah, so we were playing, and we were playing constantly. But I was good. My brother was becoming a teenager, and I was sort of getting a bit grumpy as well. I was about, like I said, I think I was about 11, or I'd be about 10 at this point. And what happened was it's difficult to remember everything, but my empire got shelved basically for a while, and I bought off a friend his Orc and Goblin army. So I had one of my friends who had Orcs and Goblins but didn't like them, and he had Skaven and he loved his Skaven, and so I bought his Orc and Goblin army off him for I think it was £40 or £50. I saved up all my birthday money at that point, and I bought it. And what I got 20 Night Goblins, and like, I've still got this army, by the way. I've still got a full Orc and Goblin army, which I never used. I've still got it with my parents. And I had something like 20 goblins, some goblin wolf riders, some snotlings, some squig herds, some trolls. Yeah, I had a whole mix of stuff. And so my empire got shelved bits. My empire weren't my main army at this point. Sorry, I should say I still had my relatively small empire army. I think I had about 50 or 60 empire models at this point, but not a lot. And orcs and goblins became my main focus. And for the next few years, it was orcs and goblins or nothing. I didn't play 40k. I shit you not. For years, I didn't. I had the occasional game, but I loved my orcs and goblins. And I being a small nerdy kid that I was a small nerd living in the countryside with few friends. I had some friends, but I lived in the middle of the countryside in like a one horse village kind of thing. It was just me and my brother. My brother was getting to the point now. I would have been like 10 or 11. I was getting into going to secondary school, and I had some. I'm not sure. I did have. I'm getting a little mix of timeline. When I first moved, I didn't have a lot of friends. But then, like I said, loads of kids in the air. I went to the new school, my new primary school, which was one down the road, and I met those people, and they had Warhammer, and that's when my Warhammer, me playing it, really exploded, because I had my own friends to play with, and I would play against my brother, and then the weekend, and then during the week when I'd go to my mates' houses, we'd play like Warhammer and stuff, and and it was fantasy. It was just fantasy. Nothing else. That's all we played was Warhammer Fantasy. There was the occasional game of 40k, but like there was a guy there that had like Bretonians. There was a guy, but one of my best friends at primary school, and unfortunately we fell out. Not fell out, but we just sort of stopped hanging out. We grew apart. But at the time, he was probably my best friend. He had high elves. And we used to play like every weekend, and I was probably a bit that guy at the time, because I was so used to playing my brother. My brother had never gone easy on me, that I never went easy on my friends, and so I pretty much beat this guy like every weekend. Sometimes he would beat me, but I pretty much beat this guy every weekend. And so I think that was one of the things, like, I never went easy on him. In hindsight, one of my regrets is, like, maybe I should have gone a bit easy on him, and maybe we would have still been friends if I'd had him as such a tool bag about the whole Warhammer thing. But we were good friends, and, whatever. Anyway, but I was playing, my brother had Chaos, and he got rid of his vampire counts. I had Goblins at this point, and I was playing High Elves. Another guy had, like, Bretonians, and there was a bunch. It was just loads of fantasy. And then my brother grew up a bit, basically, and 15, 16. I was 11. I was just going to secondary school. He was in the sort of last couple of years of secondary school, and he got more interested in things like girls and stuff, which is perfectly natural at that age. So I stopped playing Warhammer with him, basically. Warhammer became much, not that important to him. And so I was just playing with my friends. And it was really good, and I'd seen some old friends from before we moved, and they had Warhammer. I played the Skaven guy, like I said. And my fantasy days, basically, my army just built up naturally. I didn't, like I said, the only 40k army I had was my old Space Orc army when I was sort of like 10, 11 years old. So this is like, 6, 7 years later, and I haven't bought another, I've still got the same Space Orc army, but my fantasy armies, I've got a fully fleshed out Empire army, roughly, and I've got a fully fleshed out Orc and Goblin army. And I'm going, and this is after me I went to secondary school, I went to secondary school, and it was, I joined the Warhammer Club there, because I went to the same secondary school with my brother, but he was a few years older than me. He didn't really want to hang out with his little brother when he was at secondary school. Like, he did a bit, but, and so, me going to secondary school, I got to play loads and loads of cool things, but I would mostly be playing fantasy. But then when I went to secondary school, I found out that they mostly played 40k, and I only had my old crappy Space Hulk army. I couldn't really play with it. I was a bit embarrassed. The models were really old and badly painted. They were models that had been painted by a 5 or 6 year old. They weren't very good. They were all different colours, you know, pretty bad. But like, I had to basically get into 40k. And this was about 11 years old, and I was in first year of secondary school. You know, a few months in. I think I've done my first couple of terms, and I wanted to get into 40k again. And I was on the bus, so I used to get to bus to and from school. And because we lived quite far away, it's like an hour and a half bus journey every day to and from school. So like 3 hours on the bus. So you get chatting, you know, you had good, you know, some of my best mates were on the bus and everything, you know, just chatting shit. And I was just chatting about Warhammer because, you know, I didn't give a shit. I was a nerd, you know, I liked Warhammer. I liked talking about Warhammer. Chatting about Warhammer and stuff. And someone I knew, I wasn't particularly good friends with, but I knew, you know, he was an acquaintance. We'd call it, you know, he was an acquaintance. You know, neither liked or disliked, just a guy on the bus that I knew was like, oh yeah, I've got some Imperial Guard. And I was like, Imperial Guard? Like, I don't even know what that is. He was like, yeah, they're like normal humans. I was like, oh cool, that's kind of thing. So I talked to my brother about it, and he was like, oh yeah, they're the scavengers. You know, when I used to have my scavenger army, well, they're the same kind of people. And I was like, oh right, cool, yeah. That sounds really interesting. So next day on the bus, I was like, yeah, cool, what have you got? Like, I'm interested. What have you got? And he was like, well, I got a bunch of infantry, I got a tank, I got like 2 tanks, I think. I got a whole bunch of stuff. How about I go and find out what I've got, and I make a list, and I say, you know, we talk about it. I was like, yeah, that sounds really cool, man. Like, and we start talking about other stuff again, blah 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 blah. Anyway, what it turned out that he had 40 Cadians, a Chimera, a Lemur's Demolisher, a Basilisk, a Sentinel, and a Command Squad. That's what he had. And it was the old metal Command Squad with like the injured guy and the medic, and you know, the really cool one. And I still have all these models, I want to say. And I was like, yeah, man, I want that. And I saw the paint job he'd done, and I liked the paint job he'd done. It was classic Cadian 8th, really cool. And I was like, yeah, I like all that, cool. How much do you want for it? And he was like, I don't know, how much have you got? And I was like, well, it's my birthday recently. I got 40 quid. I'll give you 40 quid for it. And he was like, yeah, cool, awesome, I'll get that. So I gave him 40 quid, and he used that to go and buy a Land Raider Crusader, I think, or maybe it was just a normal Land Raider at this point. I'm not sure Crusaders had come out. I was only like I said, 11 going on 12. And that was it, and that's my first introduction to Imperial Guard. And I had the old Codex, the one with the Cadians on the front with the sergeant with the last pistol and the flamethrower guy. I had duty and honour written on the spine. And then I had my old brother's third. That was like the Codex 3.5, and I had my brother's old 3rd edition Codex with the Cadians fighting in the trench line. So I had an idea of what Guard did. Well, I had an idea what they were at that point, because I went home and I read the Codex, and he went home and made the list and blah blah blah. We traded. He gave me the Codex, blah blah, and that's what I got. And I started playing with them, and I loved it. It was so different to fantasy, you know, and I lost loads of games because a lot of the people at the Warhammer Club were much more experienced than me. But I remember, I remember when I went to secondary school, my parents really, really wanted to encourage me to do really, really well. So whenever I got my grades home at the end of each half term, they would actually pay me. They wouldn't pay me, but they'd give me a bit of money as a reward for doing well at school. So if I got like an A, I would get like £2 or £3. If I got like a B, I'd get like, I think it was like, if I got like an A, I got like £3. If I got like a B, I got like £2. If I got a C, I got £1. If I got a D, it was mine. I had to give my parents £1. And if I got an E, I had to give them £2. And if I got a U, which is a fail, an F, then I had to give them £3. So obviously I didn't want to give my parents any money. So I worked really, really hard and got in my first like couple of years of secondary school, I got loads of my parents. My parents were like, bloody hell, you never had to give you had the same as my brother, but my brother was never that bothered. So I was working really hard, getting really good grades, and in return I was basically buying loads of Warhammer. And so my Imperial Guard army expanded quite quickly because I had birthdays, I had grade money, and that was it. That was the start. Basically, that was the start. Every Friday I would go to the Warhammer Club after school and play Warhammer from like 3:30 until it closed, pretty much until like 6 or 7 o'clock at night. Every Friday I was playing with my Imperial Guard. There was no other army, and fantasy took a back seat. Apart from the occasional time when my brother wanted to play with me, when he wasn't playing, trying to be all cool and impress all the girls, because you want to impress the girls. So he would occasionally have a game of fantasy with me, but I always seemed to lose those games. But I was starting to win a bit more against my brother because I was playing. I was playing my own. My brother got Tau my brother's army was Tau at this point. He didn't have his Blood Angels. He didn't have his Scavengers. He sold them. He had Tau, and it's the same Tau army you've seen on the channel. The same one. He's barely had to buy anything new. He got them. He got Tau when they were first released at Games Day, and whenever we played, it was my Imperial Guard versus Tau. Tau were really, really powerful back then. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was getting better. The games would often be like a draw, or he would win, but it was still fun. And then, so that was it. That was the first step on the road to Imperial Guard, and I never looked back. And I think it was because it was the first time that I had, I don't know, because I had my Orcs and Goblins, and I loved my Orcs and Goblins, and I'm really tempted to dig those out and have a game with them after doing this video. I'm really into my fantasy at the moment. I've been all week I've been painting my Bretonians up. And I've done 3 out of 5 of my knight units now, so that's good. I've almost finished the army. I've just got 2 knight units left, and I'm done. But yeah, so that was the point when I had my Imperial Guard, and it just grew naturally, and it was basically, I got like a second Legion Russ. I got some more Chimeras. I got some more Sentinels. I had a really bad habit of not packing my models properly. So when my Sentinels, the feet were basically just balls of glue where they'd constantly been re-glued onto the bases. And at one point they became so unsalvageable that I just turned them into like terrain pieces. And my brother used one for like a cool bit of cinematic diorama and all that. It was just cool. But that was where that's where it all started, really. And then my brother went off to university, and at the same time I became a douchey teenager, and so I gave up Warhammer. I think I literally stopped when I was sort of 15, 16. I stopped doing I basically stopped going to the Warhammer Club. I would turn up occasionally because at that point I was one of the older players there, and I was looking after all the younger ones. And at that, I was looking after all. I was I would turn up for like an hour to make sure all the young kids were okay, and then I would go off and I would go into town, hang out with my mates. We were all like, trying. Just being teenagers, I lost interest in Warhammer. Like my brother, I got to that age where girls became more interesting, basically. And that was it. And my brother went to uni, and I was doing my thing. And then what essentially happened was, I went for like 3 years. I didn't play Warhammer. Never played it. I think I occasionally played it. I know when my brother came back from uni, I'd try and get him to have a game with me, but he was never interested. So I really fell out with it. And then what happened was I I can see the mission's getting to the end now, so I'll wrap this up. Maybe this is like part 1, childhood Warhammer, and maybe we'll do a part 2 of when I was an adult. But when I got back into Warhammer when I went to university, basically, and what happened was, when I went to it was a twist of fate. I went back to uni, and I went to university, and they had a Warhammer club at uni, and there's a local games workshop as well. And I only had a very limited amount of room that I could in my dorms at university. So there's a very limited amount of models that I could take with that, you know, after my, because in my first term I didn't take anything, and then when I went back in my second term of first year, I took my Warhammer with me, but I only had a very limited room, so I only took my Imperial Guard infantry with me, and I was forced to run an Imperial Guard infantry army. And I got back into it because I just thought there was people that I knew at uni that played it, blah blah blah, and you know, I got to the point now where I didn't really care. You know, I was 18, didn't really care what people thought about me. I was like, oh, I'll just go play Warhammer, that would be fun. And that's where it stemmed from. That's where I got the pure infantry army idea. And I had I bought the 5th edition Codex from the Games Workshop in like my first year of uni, and that's when I learned that how much things had changed. Things had changed. Like I could take blobs of infantry, and commissars were actually useful now. And you know, I never used to use commissars, and so many things. And that's when the days of my pure infantry guard began. And so I think that's where we're going to leave the video at this point. And it's just going to be interesting. It'd be really cool if you guys could leave lots and lots of comments and just tell me if your sort of childhood Warhammer experiences were similar. I know a lot of people that say they played Warhammer as a kid, and then as a teenager they gave it up, and then they came back when they were a young adult. And I imagine that's similar to a lot of people. And yeah, like it was. I just remember playing. I remember distinctly getting back into 40k when I went to university, and there was literally 3 to 4 years when I didn't pick up a dice. Well, 3 years when I didn't pick up a dice, basically, and I got back into it, and I never looked back. And it's kind of interesting. There's an interesting set of coincidences. Like, you know, I bought some guy that just overheard me talk about Warhammer on the bus. He happened to have Imperial Guard. You know, and then me going to uni, and I'd always been a treadhead when I'd been when I lived at home, but been forced to only take infantry to uni just because it didn't take up as much room as all my tanks. You know, that's basically it. So, interesting set of coincidences. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and you know, leave lots and lots of comments, and of course, I'll see you guys next time.